The KV-2 is a giant Soviet tank and one of the most notorious vehicles in World of Tanks. This tank has several interesting features. It differs from other vehicles not only in design, but also in its fighting characteristics. First off, the KV-2 can be equipped with one of 3 different guns, and they absolutely change the way this vehicle is played. Second, despite the fact that the KV-2 is a heavy tank, players often use it to provide cover, securing the rear of an advance or supporting the attacking medium tanks. The KV-2 can be useful even if it's one of the lowest tier tanks in the battle due to its thick armor and powerful main guns. Third, the KV-2 is a great bridge to the higher tier self-propelled guns based on the chassis of Soviet heavy tanks. On the other hand, the T-150 and the KV-1S have better combat characteristics than the KV-2, but not the flexibility. The top guns available for the KV-2 can cause problems for almost any enemy, even for higher tier heavy tanks. When upgrading, you can choose between the 152mm gun, the M10, and the 107mm gun, the ZIS-6. Both are excellent guns, but they play very differently from each other. Let's take a closer look at their capabilities. The 152mm M10 howitzer is a very powerful weapon. Opponents with thinner armor take full damage from high explosive HE shells, which averages about 910 points. This is a one-shot kill for almost any vehicle of Tier 6 or lower. You can also use armor-piercing ammunition with this gun, but it is not usually your best choice, both because of the ricochets and the low penetration, 110mm average for AP ammo and 206mm for premium ammo, each averaging 700 points of damage, which might give you some headaches. If you buy the large caliber tank gun rammer, the reloading speed of this gun is 20.7 seconds. The accuracy is poor and the velocity of the shell is slow. This can make it difficult to hit enemies at long range, especially if they are moving. If you use high explosive HE ammunition, it is very important to understand the amount of damage the enemy will take when you hit them. The following illustration will help you understand the mechanics of explosive shells. In other words, when any shell is trying to penetrate the target's armor, the system calculates the likelihood of penetration for this shell. In this case, the average penetration of the 152mm 53 OF530 HE shell is 88mm, ranging from 65 to 110mm. If this shell penetrates the vehicle's armor, the enemy will receive an average of 910 damage, ranging from 683 to 1138. However, if the shell doesn't penetrate the armor, it will do only half damage. Overall, enemies with better armor will take less damage naturally. It is critical to understand the best way to find out whether you can penetrate your target's armor. Using the French vehicles as our example, their average armor is 40 to 60mm at Tier 6. You should be able to do full damage almost all the time. However, the angle of the French armor is very good, so you may not always penetrate easily due to ricochets. It is always best to face your enemies so that their armor is at a 90-degree angle to you, while yours is at a 45-degree angle to them, to avoid ricochets on their vehicle and promote them on your own. Let's take a look at this in practice. The relative position of your KV-2 in the battle is an essential factor, but it depends entirely on the matchmaker. The tactics you will use if the KV-2 is close to the highest tier vehicle are vastly different from the tactics you will use if it is nearer to the lowest tier tank. Let's take a closer look at the KV-2 as a top tier vehicle in the match. The KV-2 is fighting primarily against tanks with poorer armor, which are controlled by less experienced players who don't hide the weak spots of their tanks as well as they could. Your task is to move to one of the best positions on the map for heavy tanks. You will probably not be the first one there, due to your low speed, but you should be able to find a good spot nearby. You must be patient in the first half of the battle, and not try to be a hero. You should shoot mostly targets at medium or long range. When the enemy falls back, you will have to choose between advancing and defending your base. In either case, you'd better stay near your teammates because they will help you destroy the survivors and cover you while you're reloading. You shouldn't rush forward if you don't have specific information about enemy dispositions. A couple of powerful tanks could destroy you with a flanking maneuver because you reload slowly and, despite your generally good armor, it is not really going to last against a dedicated attack. Your main tactic should be to patiently destroy everything moving on the battlefield. Rushing slowly forward or defending the base is not very useful with this tank. The KV-2 is particularly dangerous in one-on-one engagement since you can easily destroy an enemy with one shot. This is one reason why most players don't want to meet this tank head-on in an urban environment. You can bait an enemy to advance by exposing your turret or track for just a moment. And of course, you should never attack without the support of your allies. If you don't destroy an enemy tank with a single shot, you might not survive to make another one without some help. Whenever an inexperienced player exposes their weak side or rear armor, you can use this opportunity to destroy them. If an opponent shoots you and falls back, you should never chase him, not only because there may be more enemies waiting, but also because you're just too slow. Next, let's take a closer look at the KV-2 as a low-tier vehicle in the match. This Soviet heavy tank may be thrown into combat with Tier 7 or Tier 8 tanks, but it can still hold its own. You can choose between two different tactics in this situation. The first is similar to when the KV-2 is nearer the top-tier vehicle. However, in this case, you should stay behind your stronger allies and shoot only when enemy vehicles are reloading. In this way, you support the advance, doing solid damage, but not very much compared to your target's health. It is most important to be cautious in games like this because your opponents can destroy you with just a couple of hits. The second tactic in this case is very difficult to achieve. However, it can be very rewarding to make your enemies angry. Sneak to the side or to the rear of your enemies if possible, taking only perfect shots. The purpose of this tactic is to deal as much damage as possible in one single shot. Because your opponents are fighting against more serious enemies to their front, they may not attack you. If you do this correctly, and with a lot of luck, you can deal major damage and influence the course of the battle. Unfortunately, you just can't use this tactic on some maps. For example, on maps like Malinovka and El Haluf, where it is very hard to flank the opposition. However, on maps with an urban environment like Ingst or Siegfried Line, you have a great opportunity to use this tactic. You can do a lot of damage to an enemy tank by just crossing one backyard to engage them. You can also use these two tactics in combination in the same battle by playing support at the beginning of the match and then sneaking off to flank them. This is definitely your best option, if you can pull it off. Let's take a closer look at the KV-2 with the ZIS-6. It is a little easier to play the tank with this gun. If you buy the large caliber tank gun rammer, the rate of fire will increase to 7 rounds per minute. The gun averages 300 damage and has quite good penetration, 125 to 209 mm, 167 mm average, and 219 mm average for premium APCR. This gun is very good all around, even if you are a low-tier vehicle in the battle. However, you might have problems with much higher-tier vehicles. You should shoot only into their weak spots, which can be hard because of the low accuracy of this gun. The French Tier 6 equivalent, the ARL-44, has a more accurate gun and is able to penetrate more armor. The KV-2, when equipped with the ZIS-6, becomes a more ordinary heavy tank, losing the particular style that it can get from the M10. KV-2 tactics with the 107 mm gun, when nearer the top end of the roster, are very different from those the KV-2 with the 152 mm gun. You should still wait patiently to penetrate the enemy vehicles, but now you can shoot more at medium and long range. Now you are also more dangerous in action against multiple enemies because you can fire more often, dispatching weaker enemies quickly. It is also easier to move forward, but you'd still better do it with a couple of friends. Otherwise, you might end up watching the rest of the game from the sidelines. When you are near to the lowest tier tank with this gun, act more like a heavy medium tank, staying in the rear to protect the base and the assault teams from being flanked or scouted. You can also support the medium tanks directly, although you may have some trouble keeping up. You can penetrate any medium tank of the same tier, so these should be your primary targets. Be particularly careful to avoid enemy fast medium tanks, especially if your allies are dead, since they can flank and circle you quickly. Rushing forward when you're low on the list is always a bad idea anyway. The primary purpose of the KV-2 in these battles is to eliminate the enemy's light and medium tanks, especially those that penetrate the front lines or flank around behind. Let the high-tier tanks rush forward, while you protect the self-propelled guns. Your gun can still deal serious damage. This technique may not be as fun as rushing out to meet the enemy head-on, but it is very useful to your teammates. Since you are their last best hope, you should find a good spot near the SPGs. As long as your artillery is alive, your chances of winning the battle are higher. You shouldn't kill yourself trying to take on the enemy heavy tanks. You can be a better teammate guarding the rear area. So which modules work the best on your KV-2? The first item for the 152mm gun should always be the large caliber tank gun rammer. This module makes the rate of fire a little higher, and you'll need every second you can get. You may also want to buy the enhanced gun laying drive. This module reduces the time it takes to aim between shots. The binocular telescope can be very useful for low-tier battles. You will be able to see the enemy before they see you, as long as you hold still. Coated optics may be better if you plan on moving a lot. However, the advantage given by this module is not very big. Ventilation is also a good module, but since this tank has a poor view range, you may want to stick to improving your view range. As for the skills for the members of your crew, you should definitely learn the repair skill. Sixth Sense is also great for the commander. These perks will make your life easier and longer lasting. The commander should learn the repair as his second skill when possible, and your gunner should learn Snapshot, since this perk reduces accuracy penalties. Off-road driver is the perfect ability for your driver. There are no outstanding skills for the radio man, but Call for Vengeance and situational awareness can be handy. Your loader should learn Safe Stowage or Adrenaline Rush. All in all, the KV-2 is a tank with a lot of possibilities. The lack of maneuverability is definitely one of the cons of this vehicle. This tank is not meant to be a frontline hero. Its main purpose is to support allies with heavy firepower. You should always be alert, observe the battlefield, control your enemy's choice of positions, and select the most dangerous targets to destroy first. Plan carefully, but be able to think on your feet. You can only win if you work with your team.